When I was a kid, I was genuinely so obsessed with the Hunger Games, and that's mostly because this was the first book I ever read that as a kid made me think that reading was kind of fun. And because of that, the Hunger Games has honestly held such a special place in my heart, which is why this is going to be bringing me immense pain. Oh, that hurt. That hurts the soul, that does. Now I just gotta do it 3 more times. Now hold on. I can already hear y'all furiously typing your comments right now, and maybe it's a little deserved. Just trust me. So, as I'm sure that many of you probably already know, we're getting the new Hunger Games prequel movie. It's the something about songs and snakes? The snake songs singing the birds. Songs of birds and snakes. What is this darn movie called again? The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Admittedly, at first, I thought this was just something the studio made up so that they could milk more money out of the Hunger Games franchise, kind of like what they did with Fantastic Beasts, but to my surprise, yes, it's the most recent book in the series, a prequel that Susan wrote herself that came out a few years ago that I just never heard of. And since then, I've been told that's actually pretty good. Which, now that I know about it, of course I want to read the new book, but if I want to read that book, I should probably reread the whole series because it's been like 10 years since I read the series. And if I'm already getting the book series again anyway, I should probably just be extra and turn it into a fancy leather-bound book set so I can read it in style. That just sounds logical to me. Plus, look at my Percy Jackson book series. It looks so lonely up there. They obviously need more friends. Just ignore the amount of dust that came off of that when I picked it up. So that's why today I'm going to be showing you how to take some ordinary hardcover books and turn it into a leather-bound book set so cool that it probably would have made little middle schooler me cry at the sight of it. I'm super excited, so let's get started. Alright, so here's what I'm picturing for the books. So I went ahead and gathered a ton of inspo of other leather-bound books, and I want to find a sort of median between that aesthetic and then the current aesthetics of the covers already. And don't get me wrong, I love how the covers look right now. It's pretty simple and straightforward, with the main focus being on the symbol of each book and then accompanied by little circular motifs going on in the background that kind of give it a more futuristic look without being over the top. So in my design, I'm going to take elements of both, with the main focus still being on the symbols of each book, and then adding embossing and other little details to it to kind of elevate it a little bit. But before I can go and make it in real life, I have to design it in Illustrator first. Now, while I'm working on designing these covers, I think now is the perfect time to tell you about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Now, over my time in the creative field as a graphic designer, I've had to learn a lot of creative tools, many of which I use on projects on this channel all the time. From Photoshop, InDesign, Blender, and even Illustrator, which I'm using to design right now. Not to mention Premiere Pro to edit all these videos, but also needing to learn new programs for work like Webflow, Figma, and After Effects. So trust me when I say I know how daunting and frustrating it can be when it comes to learning a new program. That is where Skillshare comes in. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives and has classes on thousands of topics, including all the programs I just mentioned before, led by industry pros that will take you from the basics all the way up to advanced tips and tricks, all in one place. They also have classes for creative productivity and organization. Like right now, I'm going through Liz Brindley's course all about time management for creatives. This has been so helpful because, let's be honest, as creatives, we're not normally the most organized people. Or at least I'm not. I need all the help I can get. There's also classes on skills from music, fine arts, freelancing, or if you just want to crochet cute stuffed animals, they have classes for that too. So if you're interested in learning something new, the first 500 people to click the link in the description will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare. And I mean, considering you can complete a course or two within that time completely for free, it's a pretty good deal. Thank you once again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let me go ahead and show you what I've come up with for these book covers. Alright, so I have all the gold foil outlines laid out here. I did shorten the title of the Songbird one because it's just so much longer than the other ones. I know that the Mockingjay isn't supposed to be in a circle because the whole point is that they broke free, but it worked way better in a circle than the other options I tried. And everything is all uniform, so it should look really good in a set. I even added little numbers. And don't worry, I spell checked everything this time. I'm not making that mistake again. To this day, I still get comments that, oh no, look at you misspelled thief. It's okay, Percy Jackson also had dyslexia. I don't have dyslexia. I just don't know how to spell. Moving on from that, let's go ahead and get started with the text blocks. And as dramatic as I made it seem, I was actually very careful to make sure everything stayed intact. So it makes it pretty easy to reuse the headbands and just have to touch up the binding with a little bit of Elmer's glue. And I know what you're thinking, Elmer's glue, shouldn't you be using some fancy bookbinding glue? While there are actually glues meant for bookbinding, the main thing is just to find a PVA glue or a glue with a neutral pH balance. And we need a lot of it for bookbinding, so Elmer's glue it is. And then to finish off setting these text blocks, we need to make some end pages. It's important to make this out of a sturdy paper because this is what's going to be holding the text block to the cover. I'm using a black cardstock that I am folding and trimming down to the same size as the text block. Though if you're doing a project like this and want to add a little bit more personality to the bind, I definitely recommend finding a decorative paper that you can use. I'm just being boring and using all black because it's what I had on hand. I just really didn't want to run back out to Joann's, alright? That aside, I just take a little bit of glue and put about a 1/4 inch line down the spine and then press on the end cover. Enough for it to make a strong bond, but you also don't want it like covering the title page either. Then you just gotta flip it over and do the same to the back of the book. And the last step is to press them so they stay flat. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I've had to get creative in the past of how to press my books without a book press. I'm a professional bookbinder. Well, today that finally changes. Kinda. If you're sitting there thinking that this kinda looks like 2 cutting boards that I just screwed together, you're not wrong! This is a DIY I got from Sea Lemon's channel, and just the low cost of 2 cutting boards from Ross and some wing nuts, we have a book press. Now moving on to the covers, which, like the text blocks, are already made and are already done. I'm just going to reuse them. Now, funny thing about projects like these is I like to call it barely bookbinding. I'm not even sewing anything, I'm not making the covers, but it's also fun because essentially all we're doing is just zhuzhing up the covers. And the end result is going to look so cool and so fancy when all we did is just cover it in leather. So basically, we just take all the tedious parts out of bookbinding and we only do the fun part. Now, in order to give it a little bit more depth, we're going to make some embossing, which we're going to use with the help of a little technology. So using an SVG from the design I created earlier, we're basically going to cut out a little raised part on the book. I'm using this mounting board, which is also like a puzzle mounting board, it doesn't really matter. But also the back of a sketchbook also works really well. Admittedly, the mounting board is quite thick for this. Hard to even get through with the guillotine. So it's questionable how the Cricut's going to do. So I just set it to the highest chipboard setting and hoped for the best. Nope. Okay, a few mistakes were made, but we got through it. Cricuts admittedly aren't super made for this material, but it did manage to cut the design into the cardboard, so I just had to cut out along the lines by hand. And it did work, but it took so many swipes, and with the curved corners, it took a minute. Love that, like, not a few hours earlier, I was like, oh yeah, the tedious part, I don't have to do that. This has taken me hours to get all this embossing. I thought I would do a better job cutting it, I would only have to like lightly trace along it to like pop it out. But no, it'll make it look so good, so it'll be worth it. But it's taken so long. But nevertheless, we now have our embossing that we can glue onto the cover. Oh, I know, more glue in bookbinding? It's a real shocker. So what I had to do is make sure that they were set in place so they wouldn't move around when we're trying to glue down the leather. And in addition to the frames, I'm also adding little dividers along the spine as well, to really mimic the look of those traditional leather books. And even though it's just glued on cardboard right now, you can start to see the vision coming through. At least I hope you can, because now it's time to glue on the other covers. Now with all the covers prepped, it's time to pull it all together with a little bit of leather. Now, full transparency, I am not a leather worker. I'm very much a noob when it comes to this. Did I just say noob? It is 2023 and I said noob? Still, I'm going to try my best to explain what I know about leather, starting with the fact that for bookbinding, you want a nice soft and thin leather to work with. And from there, you want to mark where you place the book on the leather and then cut out a 1-inch border around it. This can be done with a box cutter and a ruler, but then I remembered that I actually have leather scissors that went much faster, so that's what I'm doing. Now I just need to mark out and cut for all 4 of the book covers. I did attempt to shave off the thickness around the edges because a couple people recommended that in my last video. It was a little difficult to do because the leather was so soft, so I didn't see a huge difference, but I thought I would just mention that I tried it. Now the next step is going to be wetting the top of the leather. Just enough water to have it soak into the leather, so now it'll be more malleable when we wrap it around the book. Now for the cover, we're actually going to put the text block back in it and put it into the book press. That way we'll be able to put it on its side and have easy access to the spine. Since it's curved, it can be kind of hard to get the leather to the right shape of it, and this allows me to really get in there and also get the little embossing creasings on the side as well. Now with the spine looking nice and clean, we can go ahead and move on to the covers. Gotta make sure you use parchment to protect the text block because I definitely want to read this afterwards, and that will be kind of hard with all the pages glued together. And make sure to load it up with a ton of glue because you're going to want it everywhere so the leather sticks to all the embossing creases. And to help shape the leather around it, I'm going to be using my bone folder to really bring out that shape. Now because I'm using probably a bit thicker of a leather, my shape is coming out a little bit more rounded, but overall still pretty clean. Then moving on and doing the same thing to the back cover. Once finished with the front and back, it's time to wrap the edges around to the inside. Now the proper way to wrap a corner is to cut a straight line at a 45-degree angle, though I always feel like I mess this up, so the way that I'm doing it is creating a little tab, which you could see if my arm wasn't in the way, and then just chopping it off at the intersection. And from there, it's taking the 4 remaining sides and gluing them around. And from there, it's just repeating all these steps for the rest of the book covers. And with that, we have our leather-bound covers. Genuinely, I'm very proud of how these covers came out. After how much of a struggle the embossing was, like, I'll admit, it definitely helped already having the covers pre-made, so everything was already going to be the correct size. And I think I did a pretty good job with the leather this time. I am still very much a beginner when it comes to leather work, so I think that this turned out pretty good, and it ain't even dyed yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so when it comes to coloring the books, I had to decide between if I wanted them all to be the same color, so they look like they're more in a set, or if I wanted to be more true to what the book covers are. Black for Hunger Games, red for Catching Fire, blue for Mockingjay, and then green for Snake and Song. Or Songbird and Snake, whatever. So I got some different leather colors for each, and I'm going to see how they work out. Now admittedly, I kind of just picked out the dyes based on what color they were, and I kind of didn't even realize until I started using them how different they were. Alright, so with our test colors, it's a very stark contrast from dark, real bright, and then it gets dark again. I don't mind these ones because it makes sense. It's the fact that it goes back to so dark that I don't like. Even though it looks kind of weird next to each other, I think I'm going to continue to go for all different colors and maybe just try and water this one down a little bit so it wouldn't be as dark. This could look real bad together, but at least individually they'll look good, hopefully, as long as I don't mess this up, which might happen. Who knows? Okay, with such confidence, starting first with the Hunger Games cover, because it's using like a midnight black, it's going to be super opaque and easier to do in one coat. So this was my first time using this specific dye, and it was actually quite strange because it didn't feel as much like a dye, but like acrylic paint. Like it sat more on top of the leather. Like it still stained the leather, but it didn't really like soak into it like I'm used to. Not sure if the coat was going to come out even or not. I gave it the night to dry, and it actually dried pretty well, so it's on to the next one. Now for this one, I'm actually going to be muting the color a little bit by adding in a little bit of the black dye to the red. I also switched to a sponge because I felt like it did a better job spreading it than the Doppler. And now after doing another test with the mixed dye, you could see that it was definitely way darker but still had very strong saturation. Also, as a side note, look, I learned my lesson from last time and I'm actually wearing gloves, so my hands don't end up dyed blue again for a week. Now while I do appreciate the even coat, this dye definitely dries with like a glossier, thicker coat, which is definitely the opposite of our last dye. This one more absorbs into the leather to get that pigment, so I'm going to try and go lighter on it to get this more emerald green. But I should have known that very quickly after I started its first coat that it's so thin that you're able to see where you pass over it multiple times. So in order to make it not be all streaky, you need to really build up that color. Meaning it's going to end up that dark forest green. And it's going to take me way longer to get an even coat. So overall, this type of dye is way messier, takes way longer, and it has less even of a color, but I still think I prefer it to the other ones because of the final finish of it. It still keeps so much of that natural leather texture, meanwhile the other ones kind of just look like they were painted. But overall, I'm still pretty happy with how the colors turned out. Last step for the dye, which is very important, is to add a leather finish to it. This will help give it a more matte texture and also seal in the dye so it doesn't rub off on any of your pages or your clothes or anything like that. With that, now we have some fancy leather covers. You know, they actually look okay together. I thought it was going to be such a big contrast, but these don't look bad. But now that all the dyeing is done, we can finally bring back in our text blocks and make these actual books again. First step should be triple checking to make sure that I'm actually gluing the correct text block into the right cover, because I'm not putting that past me. That 100% sounds like something I would do. Now, it's actually quite simple to attach the book inside the cover, and unsurprisingly, it requires even more glue. Essentially what you're doing is lightly coating the end page with glue all the way up to the edge and leaving a little bit of room between the spine. Making sure not to use too much glue as it will rip the paper, but just enough for it to really get a good stick. And the last thing to do is to press them while they dry. Though I can't really fit all of them in there at the same time now. So it's time to use a book press that is pressing books as a book press for other books, which only seems logical to me. Alright, now going into the home stretch, it's time to add a little bit of gold foil. Once again, returning to the Cricut, I upload the symbol and titles. And I just kind of gotta hope that it does a good job cutting everything, especially with all the letters. It can kind of get hit or miss, and all you can do is really just watch and make sure nothing goes wrong. Once it's done, it looks like it did a pretty good job, but we won't know until we start peeling it off. Sometimes removing the gold foil can just be a nightmare because it keeps on wanting to remove parts of the elements if they're too thin, but overall with these, it did a really good job. Even with the thinner parts, it really came off easily and was actually pretty satisfying to do. And now that we have all of our shiny little stickers, it's time to start putting them onto the books. Wait, this foiling experience has been way too easy. Normally there's some sort of nightmare that comes across. Like genuinely, this feels wrong. Look how easily this comes off and how good it looks. Surely the Mockingjay pin will go on just as easily, right? I mean, sure, the embossing's making it a little bit difficult to iron on, but I'm sure it's getting enough heat, right? Nope, I can literally see the parts that aren't sticking. Let's go back to the title. That works so well. Ooh, look how shiny it looks. Totally distracting from the glaringly obvious problem that is right on the front and center of the book. You know what would definitely work? Putting a fork on the iron and then trying to heat it up. Yeah, surprisingly, that didn't work, and now I need to go get a smaller iron. I had to buy a little name brand Cricut little mini press thing from Walmart because I know I'm going to be super mad if I start peeling this up and I don't let it press properly. I know that there's non-name brand ones that are probably cheaper, but Walmart had this and I want to finish this project. Look, normally I'm against buying name brand stuff from Cricut because it's probably just more expensive than it needs to be, but I can't risk not properly ironing the front foil again. So let's see if this Walmart purchase has saved our book. Oh my god, that is like the cleanest I have ever gotten it. I'm almost mad at how clean that is. You know how long and how many hours I've spent fighting with foil to make sure that it's stuck properly? And this stupid $40 mini iron just works. Even the catching fire one that has super thin lines. Why haven't I bought this sooner? I don't have any problem paying for tools if I have the means, if it makes my life easier, and you just watch me switch real time to Team Cricut here. Anyway, moving on to our last final touches, which is going to involve a little bit of gold paint and a string. I wanted to add some lines to emphasize the dividers. I don't know if the string was better than just a paintbrush, but it worked. And now the very last final touch is adding a couple of rivets. These hold absolutely no function and are just there to look cool. And with that, it's time to take a look at the final reveal. I am absolutely in love with the way that these books came out. Being able to bring new life to a series that was so special to me growing up, I'm super hyped to jump back into the series and enjoy a new story in this world. If you made it this far in the video, make sure to comment below and tell me what book series you would want made into a fancy leather-bound book set. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.